item of business is a follow-up evidence session with PetroIneos following the announcement that refinery operations will cease at Grangemouth from next year. In November last year, it was reported that the refinery would be transitioned into a finished fuels import terminal and distribution hub. In September, it was confirmed that this transition would take place during the second quarter of 2025. As part of the committee's inquiry into a just transition for the Grangemouth area, we visited the INEOS site. However, at that time, we were not made aware of the intentions for the refinery. Following the announcement, we took evidence from PetroIneos, INEOS and both the UK and Scottish governments. This morning is an opportunity to discuss developments since then, and I welcome Ian Hardy, Head of Legal and External Affairs from PetroIneos Manufacturing Scotland Limited, and Colin Pritchard, Sustainability and External Relations Director of INEOS Olefins and Polymers UK. Can I invite Ian Hardy to make a short opening statement?
Thank you, Convener. I'll be brief, but I thought it would be useful to remind members of some important context for today's session. Grangemouth is the UK's oldest refinery, and we find ourselves increasingly unable to compete with bigger, more modern and efficient sites in what is a highly competitive and global market. Simultaneously, demand for key fuels we produce at Grangemouth has already started to decline. With a ban on new petrol and diesel cars to come into force within the next decade, we foresee that the market for those fuels we produce will shrink further. Due to its age, size and configuration, Grangemouth also requires high levels of capital expenditure each year just to maintain its licence to operate. This annual outlay on essential planned maintenance and running repairs has been consistently higher than company earnings over the past decade. By way of illustration, since the PetroIneos joint venture was formed 13 years ago, our shareholders have invested nearly £1 billion in the refinery, only to absorb cash losses over £600 million. Last week, the refinery lost £385,000 on average each day, and we expect to lose more than £150 million during the course of this year.
Thanks very much for that. You've highlighted the 400 direct jobs that will be lost as a result of this decision. I mentioned earlier the work of this committee on a just transition for Grangemouth. The government have published their draft plan for a just transition, but where, from the company's point of view, is a just transition for those 400 workers that are going to lose their jobs in a very short period of time?
We've very clearly articulated to the government in Holyrood and Westminster for a number of years the challenges that our business was facing. Those challenges are driven in part by policies set by this government around the ban on new build petrol and diesel cars post-2030. So in that context, I think it's hardly surprising that there'd be an announcement as a manufacturer of petrol and diesel fuel that we would have to transition away from that at a point. In parallel, we have launched Project Willow, a study which will look at low carbon manufacturing options for the site. But let's be clear, the purpose of that study is not and will not enable a smooth transition, as I think you're alluding to, from a fossil-based economy to a non-fossil-based economy. If that was to have been put into effect, that piece of work would have had to happen 5 years ago. And let's be very clear, we came to Scottish and UK government 5 years ago with that proposition, but we didn't move on. So we are where we are today. We are committed to running an open, fair and robust consultation. That, in parallel with ensuring continuity of supply, are our two drivers at present.
And you've obviously made reference to the 400 direct jobs. What's your estimate of the supply chain jobs that will also be lost as a result of the decision?
So that's set out in the PwC report, which was prepared for Scottish Government and which we've fed into. And we are working with SMAS, Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service, to put support in place for the supply chain. But another point that I think we need to recognise is that our supply chain are not passive bystanders in the energy transition. There's an active role that they can, should, and I hope will play in it, particularly as we progress through Project Willow. We see a really meaningful and viable new economy coming from low carbon manufacturing at Grangemouth, and our supply chain have a very deep and meaningful part to play in that.
So that figure of, I think it was over 2,000 in that report, that's a figure that the company believes inaccurate.
So that's based. So we've provided raw data into PwC, Scottish Government Advisors. They've put that through their modelling, and they typically apply a factor of a multiple of 7. And then I think they've brought in other factors as well to formulate that. I don't have a direct view of how many jobs are at risk, how many indirect jobs are at risk, but that is the data that Scottish Government advisors have put out.
Okay, thanks. Can I bring in the Deputy Convener?
Thank you for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it. I wanted to start just to take it up to geopolitics and just ask what assessment you've made of a Trump presidency, his closeness to Putin, and the implications on your future plans in Scotland and indeed the UK. And have you had any discussions with that with the Scottish Government or the UK Government?
Morning, Ms Thompson. So as regards the effect of a Trump presidency, trading is at the heart of our business. We've always been exposed to the geopolitics, if you like, of the oil markets. As a refiner, we were responsible. We had to procure crude internationally, and 50% of our crude product slate would come internationally. Going forward, we will be importing finished fuels, and 100% of our finished fuels will likely be manufactured internationally. The way we've ameliorated that risk, and we were cognizant of the potential for any geopolitical event, I think, including a Trump presidency in the planning phase, is we have established what we see as a virtual pipeline of fuels that will come direct into the heart of the Grangemouth hub. And by that, I mean we have taken control of all aspects of the supply chain to ensure continuity of supply and to address the risks I think you're alluding to. We have long-term product offtake agreements in place. We have long-term storage contracts in place in ARA, Amsterdam, Rotterdam and Antwerp, the European trading hub. We have long-term shipping contracts in place of the specific size of vessels that you need to get into the Grangemouth jetties. And we're investing £30 million in our tank farm to ensure that we have sufficient ullage over any number of foreseen and potentially unforeseen events to ensure that at the pump there is no impact on continuity of supply. So to the extent we can, we have tried to create a robust Trump-proof supply chain.